Words About Books is a poorly spoken podcast. I'm narrator Nate, and I'm joined today by Detective Ben. How's it going, buddy?
Pretty good. I'm ready to solve the case.
So this week, we're discussing the murder of Roger Ackroyd. So it's good we have a detective here around to help solve this mystery.
Indeed it is, yes.
So, word of caution, if you haven't figured it out by now, we spoil the shit out of every book we read. You should just read along with us. But that's an FYI because this is a mystery, and, you know, part of the mystery is the mystery. First, we have to do about the author, I guess, because we normally do that. But do we really need to for Agatha Christie? She's very famous, well-known author, probably the most prolific one we've covered on this, right?
Definitely, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, except maybe Timothy's on.
Yeah, that's true. Well, Agatha Christie's written, according to Google, at least 77 novels. So you probably heard of at least some of them. Some of the more famous ones being Murder on the Orient Express, The Mysterious Affair at Styles, Death on the Nile. There's a shitload of mystery books. She's a very famous author. If you haven't heard of her, I would be shocked. This particular novel focuses on the exploits of Hercule Poirot, who's appeared...
Nope, that's not how you say that.
Are you sure? What is it?
Poirot?
How do you say it?
His name's not Poirot, it's Poirot.
Yeah, all right. Guess I'll listen to you because you said you were part Belgian.
Je suis.
So he's appeared in 33 novels and 54 short stories and at least one TV adaptation. He is a Belgian, just like you are, apparently. He's also a detective, just like you are. He's kind of a less douchey, more polite Sherlock Holmes. Is that what you would describe him as?
I'd say that's fair. There's also Dupin, which is another famous fictional French detective written by Edgar Allan Poe that came before Sherlock Holmes. So I think he takes inspiration from both.
Yeah, and he's also got the greatest mustache I've ever seen in my life.
Have you looked up the David Suchet portrayal of Poirot?
Let me see if this is what I'm thinking of. Yeah. I used to watch this as a kid with my mom.
Yeah, that's the PBS BBC show that I think most people of a certain age, probably we're about as young as it gets for people who are going to remember that show.
Right. It looks like it came out in 89. So, yeah. And he has the mustache, the perfect mustache.
He is my image of Poirot.
Mine too. Anything else you want to add about Agatha Christie?
Yes, because I told a couple of people that I was reading this book, and I was surprised at how many people thought, okay, there was at least one person who thought Agatha Christie was Nancy Drew. There was a larger number of people who thought she wrote Nancy Drew. Agatha Christie is not Nancy Drew. Nancy Drew is not a real person. Agatha Christie is. And she did not write or have anything to do with the Nancy Drew novels. I think they're getting... Because Agatha Christie, she doesn't just have Poirot, she also has Miss Marple.
Yes.
So I think maybe they're getting Nancy Drew, the young teenage detective, confused with the elderly woman detective. But yeah, they're not the same. Just two female mystery novel names that you may have conflated. They're not the same.
Yeah, one of them is a real person.
Yeah. I know there's...
See, that's why you're the detective.
There's a lot of people that don't like they've definitely... I don't think there's anybody who hasn't heard the name Agatha Christie, but there are definitely people who don't know anything about her.
So it's funny you mention that because first of all, shout out to my grandmother who was such a huge Agatha Christie fan that she decided to do what older people do, and she wrote her a letter way back when and she received a generic signed form letter that she framed and hung in her house. But the reason I bring that up, other than, to shout out my grandmother.
It's a really poor shout out.
Yeah, it was.
Future Ben here. So, as it turns out, the letter Nate's grandmother received from Agatha Christie was not, in fact, a form letter that she just ignorantly or in raptured, like, fan admiration framed. It was actually a real written response from Agatha Christie that she had every right to treasure, and Nate is a horrible grandson. And I just needed to come back in time from the future to make sure you all knew that Nate is a horrible grandson. Just the worst. Okay, I'm going back to the future now. I'm not going to give you any information about it. It's worse. I'm sorry. It doesn't.
My mom thought that I did not know who Agatha Christie was. She also thought my wife didn't know who Agatha Christie was when she was telling us this story. So she also has no faith in my cultural awareness.
Well, she has met you.
Yeah, that's fair. So we also have to talk about why I picked this book, because that's the thing we do, apparently. This book is one that was famously difficult to solve. I think this was the book that won some like mystery writers contest, where the rules were you had to write a mystery book that was possible to solve, but no one else in the group managed to solve it. So you've got your work cut out for you, Detective Ben.
Who were these other people that tried to solve it? Were they like
other mystery writers?
I've written a book. Well, half of one.
That's true. We have written a book.
So, yeah, one of my characters was really smart, so that probably translates to me. So,
I think that's how that works. You're right.
Yeah.
I also saw that our reading list was really heavy on comedy and sci-fi and fantasy, so I decided to shake things up with a mystery.
Well, I'm going to tell you for this book, so I haven't read a lot of Poirot. I have read Dupin, and I have read Sherlock, and I'm going to get myself in the headspace of Sherlock Holmes to solve this mystery. Okay. And to do that, I've got 3 separate pipes, so I don't have to pack a bowl in the middle of this, set aside. And because this could be a 3-pipe problem, that's a reference. And I also have a generous helping of the old Bandito Blanco, you know what I'm saying? So I think we're going to get this off right.
Bandito Blanco. Oh, man. You are definitely a white Belgian. Anyway, let's move on to the book. So we are introduced to a small English town of King's Abbot through the eyes of Dr. Shepherd. And it opens up with the death of one of the wealthy townswomen, Mrs. Ferrars?
Yeah, I said Ferrars in my head.
All right. So Carolyn is Dr. Shepherd's sister, and she is really good at getting information without having to even go outside of her house. That seems to be like her hobby. She doesn't have a job. This is a running theme in the story. She suspects that Mrs. Ferrars killed herself. And the reason she killed herself, she thinks... What the hell are you doing?
What? Getting ready.
Okay.
What are you doing?
The reason she suspects she killed herself is guilt. She suspects that Mrs. Ferrars murdered her husband many years ago. Now, there was no suicide note found on the scene, but there was a bottle of Veronal, which can kill you if you overdose. So, Detective Ben, thoughts so far?
What's Veronal?
That would be it's a drug in the same category as like Xanax or Valium.
So,
but there's none at the scene. Oh, sorry, it's a barbitol, so it's even worse than Valium or Xanax.
Can you tell me a little bit more about how the husband died? Do we know the precise cause of his death?
The official cause of death is gastritis, but that could potentially look like arsenic poisoning. But there is no evidence to suggest any sort of poisoning took place.
Interesting. So, did they have a strained relationship?
He was a drunk, so let's go with yes, at least on some level.
Was his death ever investigated for murder? Was there ever...
Nope, it was ruled gastritis, which I guess killed you back in the day. That sucks.
I was going to say, is that like an old-timey... What is gastritis? Is that like a... Sounds like an upset stomach.
It's inflammation, irritation of your stomach lining. Yes.
So his stomach just burst.
What could have happened is the lining eroded, and then he got a nasty infection, and he died.
Suddenly.
Yes.
Oh, she killed him. That's bullshit. She killed him.
All right. So Detective Ben believes Mrs. Ferrars was in fact a killer. Do you think she killed herself?
It would be a little weird to kill yourself of guilt several years after you got away with crime. I don't know too many people who are guilty about killing their abusers. So I don't know. I don't know enough about it. Is a doctor going to investigate this, you said?
Yes, Dr. Shepard is our man whose eyes we see the story unfold through.
So in this scenario, you're the Dr. Shepard to my Poirot.
Yes, to your Poirot.
So you said she's been taking Veronal, which is a barbiturate. Did she show any like symptoms around town of being addicted to this drug? Like, I guess you can just, you don't need a prescription, you just get it.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if you could get that back in the day. I wouldn't be surprised if you could buy that over the counter back when this took place. This is like the 1930s, somewhere in there. It's between the First and the Second World War. Spoiler alert, there's going to be a second one. Just watch out for that. But yeah, as far as I know, we don't know if she was an addict. But she would know that taking a whole bunch of this stuff could kill you.
I suspect foul play. That's a thing that James, the guy who played James Bond when he was doing the Southern guy in the that movie by that guy who ruined Star Wars. That's a quote from that.
What? Okay.
Daniel Craig?
Oh, okay.
Plays a Southern...
Pierce Brosnan will always be my James Bond. Anyway.
How old are you?
Very. So, King's Abbot, like I said, small English town. It's full mostly of unmarried ladies and retired military officers.
Nice.
Their chief export seems to be gossip and English people. In this town are two high-baller rich people of great renown.
The fuck is a high baller?
Shut up. You're the detective. You figure it out.
Okay.
So I guess it's just one now. Mrs. Ferraris used to be one of the big rich people in town. And the other is Mr. Roger Ackroyd. If you read the cover of the book, you could probably see where this is going. So Mr. Ackroyd is purported to be the heart and soul of King's Abbot. So let's just hope nothing bad happens to him.
Now, what is his profession?
He makes wagon wheels or some shit. Let's talk about the past, okay? Instead of the horrible thing that's going to happen to him. All right. He married a woman in his youth who drank herself to death and left him with her child. His name is Ralph, who has a penchant for mischief and sleeping around. He lives in London, but he was actually seen recently in King's Abbot, although Roger doesn't know that, as we'll soon find out. Also in Roger's house, his maid, Miss Russell, his sister-in-law, his niece, Flora. And when I say sister-in-law, I mean Roger's brother's wife. He had a brother who died, and then his wife just hung out. Roger kind of got a raw deal in life. He keeps getting all these people in his house.
Yeah, he's just cursed to be a rich single man.
Yeah. Well, funny you should mention that, because everyone in town suspected that he had the hots for Mrs. Ferrars, and I guess they could have married their fortunes together and become super wealthy. But that's gonna have to be halted. Those plans, because she's dead.
Well, now where there's a will, there's a way.
Oh, Jesus. So Mr. Ackroyd comes across Dr. Shepard in town and wishes to discuss something with him urgently, but in a more private location. So he invites him to dinner that night. Before the dinner party, Miss Russell goes to see Dr. Shepard to talk about her knee. And her knee appears to be fine, but she's interested in cures to drug abuse. Dr. Shepard suspects that maybe she's there to gossip about Mrs. Ferrar's death. So he starts talking with her about drug abuse, and when he gets to Veronal, she abruptly changes the subject to poisons that you can't detect from Argentina and whether those exist. And she kind of laughs it off like she's been reading a lot of detective stories. And it's been implied even this early on that maybe she has a thing for Mr. Ackroyd. So do you think she had anything to do with Mrs. Ferrar's death, Detective Ben?
No, but based on the way she was acting, I do wonder if perhaps she doesn't have some suspicions or maybe know more than she's letting on. I briefly wondered when I read this chapter if she suspected that maybe Roger Ackroyd had something to do with Mrs. Ferrar's death. I don't, for my gut, my cocaine-fueled gut tells me she's not a killer. But everyone is guilty until proven innocent, and we can't rule anyone out. So
absolutely,
I'm keeping her on the list.
So before we get to the dinner party, we have to make mention of Dr. Shepard's new neighbor, Mr. Poirot or something like that. He's a weird guy with an amazing mustache. he's not important though. Let's ignore him.
Ponyo.
This conversation does let us know that Ralph Patton, who is Roger Ackroyd's stepson, adopted son, whatever you want to call him, is engaged to his non-blood relative cousin, Flora Ackroyd. And this was just announced about a week ago.
This Mr. Poirot, who is obviously Hercule Poirot, he has ostensibly come to this town to retire and grow vegetable marrows.
Yes.
And I refuse to Google it because I do not want to ruin the image in my mind that Poirot is actually starting a hardcore vegan straight edge band called Vegetable Marrow. I think they actually meet by him
throwing one over the fence.
He throws a vegetable marrow over the fence, and the good Dr. Shepard is like, oh, what is this? This angry Belgian man throwing vegetable marrows at me. And maybe you, dear listener, do know what a vegetable marrow is, and that makes perfect sense to you. But marrow is what's in bones.
That's why you're the detective.
So I'm just thinking like cracked bones. He's just growing them and they're thrown everywhere. And that's my horror-addled mind. I just can't. I don't know what a vegetable marrow is. There are so many old-timey things in this book that I don't know what they are, and I refuse to Google it.
Also of note, Carolyn recounts to Dr. Shepard that she overheard something strange in the woods earlier. Ralph Patton was talking to some woman about how Mr. Ackroyd will cut him off if he fucks up, and he stands to gain a great sum of money whenever Roger, whenever he happens to die in like a couple of years or whatever. The conversation abruptly ends because Carolyn steps on a twig and the two flee into the woods, I guess. And she never actually sees the lady in this conversation. And Shepard does briefly meet with Ralph before the dinner party, who alludes to some vague problem he's having, like every vague book posting ever made.
So, first thing, I absolutely love Caroline. And like, our summary can't possibly do justice to the way she's described. And in general, this is going to be like one really positive note of mine throughout the book is just how much characterization Agatha Christie is able to give people with so few words.
Yes, absolutely.
This book is really witty and funny. And Caroline, like, is this busybody who goes out of her way to acquire gossip. And she purposely was hiding out in the woods, stalking Ralph Patton when she saw him with a mysterious woman. And that's when she overheard it. And she says something about like, oh, I fancied a stroll in the woods. And Dr. Shepard comments that she has never a day in her life fancied a stroll in the woods. And there's just so much little like snappy, sarcastic back and forth throughout the book that I just absolutely love. And Caroline is my favorite character. The second thing I wanted to add is that while Roger Ackroyd is the heart and soul of this town, goddamn if there isn't a single person in this place that won't talk to Dr. Shepard about their problems. Like, you glossed over it, but Dr. Shepard's like, well, if Ralph's in town and he's in trouble, then I'd better go have a word with the young man. And Ralph Patton's just like, oh, Doc Shepard, bro, what's up? Oh, I fucked up this time, man.
Is that your Ralph?
Fucked up this time, man. Dude, this guy walks around with fucking rubber studs in his boots. You know what he's about. Fucking alpha Chad, this guy. He's like, oh, man, Shep, I don't know what I'm going to do, man. I don't know. Old man's going to cut me off this time. And Dr. Shepard's like, what'd you do? And he's like, I can't tell you, man. Nope, not till the end. Nope, can't tell you. So
vague book.
Oh, but it's bad, man. Oh, it's bad.
I've got a really big problem.
I got so many problems, man.
Shower me in praise. Give me a like.
Detective Ben again? I bet he knocked her up. I bet he's got a secret love baby.
We can only hope. Let's fast forward to the dinner party. So we meet Parker the butler.
Fuck him.
Raymond the scribe.
Don't like him.
And Miss Russell once more.
Boring. She's just boring.
Yeah, he almost collides with her, and she appears to be out of breath like she's been running. Dr. Shepard has this vague feeling that she doesn't want him there. She's upset with his presence in the house.
And I don't know if you're planning to mention it, but he heard some sort of bang in the room before she comes out the door totally out of breath.
Yeah, I was going to mention that.
I cut you off, so.
Okay, well, that's fine. Because when he's in that room, he's like, God, what was that noise? And then he notices there's like a silver table with a glass lid that's just filled with curios from all around the world. And he closes it and opens it. And that's what it was. Like, or I guess he opens and closes it.
He opens it and he drops it.
That's what it was.
Yeah, and that's what it was.
He's like, oh, that's what it was. Okay. He goes to dinner, and at the table are Flora, her mother, whose name I don't know, so I just call her Mrs. Ackroyd, Roger, of course, Dr. Shepard, Raymond, and Major Hector Blunt, who goes hunting big game in Africa.
Yeah, he's a charming guy.
Yeah, definitely.
Regular Don Jr., that one.
Roger does not eat most of his meal. He seems really nervous, and afterwards he calls Dr. Shepard to meet in private in his study. So Roger confides that he proposed to Mrs. Ferrars.
No wonder she killed herself. I mean, what? Sorry.
Initially, she rejected him, but she told him to do it again after her time of mourning was up. So I guess he proposed to someone who was in mourning. Not cool. And when he does, she accepts, but she admits that she killed her previous husband for being an abusive asshole.
I knew it, yeah.
So Roger is stunned by this, and that just makes Mrs. Ferrars feel more guilty. She tells Roger not to do anything for 24 hours and, like, she'll get back with him. And then she was dead the next morning. So.
Sucker.
So she told Roger before she died that somebody was blackmailing her and that she knew, or that they knew, sorry, spoilers, that they knew she killed her husband, but she never told Roger who the blackmailer was for some reason. He suspects somebody in his own household. Mrs. Ferrars gave him that impression without telling him outright. But just then, a letter arrives from her. I guess Parker brings it in. Is that right? Am I getting that right?
Yes, Parker brings in the mail.
So Parker brings in the mail at, like, I want to say 8 o'clock at night, or it's even later. That's weird, but whatever. It's the old times.
Yeah.
Ackroyd is really paranoid, and so he has Shepard lock the windows, which he does, and he finds a letter written to him by Mrs. Ferrars, and he begins reading it, and then he stops because he wants to finish reading it in private. And Shepard is urging him to keep reading the letter, but he just refuses. He's being a stubborn asshole and not reading it.
And Shepard's like, this is the kind of information that it would be really inconvenient for you not to have shared with somebody if you were to wind up dead in a few minutes.
Yeah.
In my real life, I've had moments like that where I was like, you know what? I'm going to go for a hike. No, you know what? I'm going to call someone and tell them I'm going for a hike.
I've had those same experiences as well, actually. It's like, hey, just letting you know, like, in case I don't come back, here's where I went.
Yeah, I'm going to meet a hippie at a second location. Just thought you should know.
So yeah, of course, Roger Ackroyd's like, no, we can't do that. That would solve the mystery, potentially. The mystery of my own death here in just a moment. I've read the cover of this book. So Dr. Shepard's like, well, fuck, I guess I can't commit him, or I can't convince him. Sorry, Jesus, what is wrong with me today? And he leaves, and he runs into Parker. Parker's like,
oh shit, I wasn't, what?
That's weird that I was so close to this door just now. Anything you guys need? And Shepard's like, no, like, don't disturb him. He wants to be left alone. Fuck off. I don't know what you're doing, but that's weird. And then he goes home. And on the way home, he runs into a stranger who asks him the way to Fernley Park, which is the name of Roger Ackroyd's house.
Fucking estate. It has a garden and a creek and another house.
Yeah, he has a fucking estate. That's fair. So the man is trying very hard to hide his face and not, like, his voice just sounds familiar but not familiar, which is a shitty description, and Dr. Shepard should be ashamed of it. But yeah, it's down the street to your right. You can't miss it.
The best way is to take the little path next to the side that'll go towards the open window that Ackroyd currently has his back to. So that's probably the route you're going to want to take. Okay, bye.
So he directs him, and then he goes home, and then at 10:15, he receives a phone call. Roger Ackroyd has been murdered, just like the title said. What are your thoughts, Detective Ben?
Well, it wouldn't be a detective novel without a stupid, convoluted twist that no one in real life would ever do, such as, I have the name of the person who's probably did it right here, but I'm not going to read it to you. Yeah, if I were Dr. Shepard, I would have been like, you read that letter right now, you fat fuck. You read it fucking now. I just snatched it out of his fat little fingers. I read it right then and there. Because I'm Detective Ben, goddammit. This is police business now. So, yeah. And, if Parker isn't the blackmailer, he's certainly an aspiring blackmailer. And it's funny that he's still even the butler because just everybody hates him.
Which is fair.
I don't like Parker, but at the same time, I can kind of see why he doesn't like them. So, yeah, whatever. I'd probably fire him. That'd be my advice. But I'd fire a lot of them. You don't need more servants than people in your family. That's just me, though. I don't think Parker did it. I kind of really wonder at this point, considering just how goddamn rich this guy is. What the hell he does? He doesn't make wagon wheels, man, unless he owns like the wagon wheel factory.
Yeah,
Also, they have cars.
he's the East India Wagon Wheel Company, Ben.
It's 1930.
Yeah, I was actually when he said wagon wheels, I was like, but wait. That's why initially I thought this took place in like the 1800s, like the mid to late 1800s. But then they started making references to the early 1900s.
But we do have one clue here now that will bother me for the rest of the book, and that is who the hell called Shepard and why call Shepard? Because they're telling him that Roger Ackroyd is dead. So you don't need a doctor. And if you wanted to alert...
You don't need a doctor? What if you could bring him back to life with that 1930s medicine?
Well, okay.
Saw off a limb.
You need a wizard, not a doctor. You need a diamond worth 1,000 gold pieces and a...
Get out of here.
And a 5th level resurrection spell. But that is the clue that kind of this whole story rides on. It is actually more important than even who the blackmailer is.
All right. Any other questions you have before we get to Shepard arriving on the scene of the crime?
No, not other than why don't more houses have names? Like, do you name them yourself, or can you just, like, does somebody have to give it a name? Is it like a nickname where, like, you can't give yourself
when
one?
You get rich enough, you buy a name from the house naming authority. Anyway, Dr. Shepard, he rushes to Mr. Ackroyd's place, or as we should be referring to it, Fernley Park. Parker greets him at the door, and Shepard's like, I got your call. Like, holy shit, like, I can't believe Mr. Ackroyd's dead. Parker's like, what? Like, what are you talking about? He didn't call Shepard, in fact. But Shepard wants to go check on Mr. Ackroyd just to be on the safe side. Once they're there, they have to, like, break the door down, don't they?
Yeah, it's locked from the inside.
Ooh. And they find out that the name of the book was, in fact, very good foreshadowing. Roger Ackroyd is dead. He has a knife protruding from his neck. And we find out soon thereafter it was a curio. It was one of those things that was in the silver display case from earlier. So Shepard has Parker get Major Blunt and Raymond while he inspects the body, I guess. And he finds that the letter is gone. Raymond arrives and asks him if it could be suicide. And Detective Ben, could a man have stabbed himself with a knife at such a weird angle into his own throat?
Well, you're the doctor, you tell me, but no. No, he couldn't, and Raymond is really fishy for even suggesting it. In fact, I decided to rank people by my level of suspicion from 0% sure that they did it to 100% sure that they did it. At no point did I ever consider that any of them were innocent. But immediately, every person who suggests that perhaps he stabbed himself like from above and behind was immediately 10% suspicion. So Raymond, I don't like him. I don't like him for this. And I think we should probably bring him in for questioning. And by questioning, I mean beating. Not sure about Major Blunt. Looks like he'd be harder to beat. We'll table that for now. But get a couple more guys and we'll think about it.
Yeah, I imagine Major Blunt as looking like a brick shit house. So the police arrive and start questioning people. The windows that were previously locked are now unlocked, and there are footprints leading away in the mud. Dr. Shepard saw him alive at 8:50. Major Blunt heard Mr. Ackroyd around at 9:30, saying the phrase, "The calls on my purse have been so frequent of late," to someone that Major Blunt didn't hear. He suspected it was Raymond, but Raymond said that was not him.
That's already fishy because only ladies have purses.
This is true, unless it was different in 1930s England.
No, that's my first clue. That's going to be a big part of solving this case.
Okay. Well, you're the detective. You keep detecting. Now, Parker.
Goddamn right I am.
Parker says Flora saw him after that because Parker was going to bring him whiskey and soda later in the evening and saw her leaving his room. So they go to question her without telling her what happened. So they tell her there was a burglary. And so she said she went to see her uncle before she went to bed. And he told her something about how nice she looked and to run along. And he died sometime shortly after that. And Blunt informs her that Roger is actually dead, causing her to faint.
Okay, so many things. First off, I don't buy that faint for a fucking minute. Somebody shake her. She's awake. She's lying. She's playing on the Victorian male power fantasy of these British gentlemen around her that think a fragile damsel would faint at the first sight of blood or bad news. The joke's on her, okay? Because Detective Ben has no power fantasies. He gave up on that a long time ago. I haven't felt powerful a day in my life. So that's my first problem. She's awake. She's lying. She's lying about something. She's at 20% suspicion right now. 20%. Second thing, why are all these non-police in the police investigation?
It's a small town. They can't afford more than like 2 police officers, Ben.
Well, that leaves one to question her and one to stand at the door, keeping the other people out. Major Blunt, I didn't tell you you could tell her that. Major Blunt, why are you here? Go away, please.
That's a good point. So the next day, Flora visits Dr. Shepard, and there's a little suspicion on Ackroyd's stepson the night before, but it wasn't a lot. But then some fucker, yeah, I changed it from pencil neck geek, Ben, because you took exception to my use of that phrase.
I just wondered when you became this like alpha male power lifter calling people pencil neck. Our readers have never seen your neck, but it is not unlike a pencil.
My neck is very muscular. It's like 8
voluptuous.
Yes, let's go with that. So some douchebag from Cranchester named Inspector Reglin showed up, and he is absolutely positive that the stepson Ralph is the guy who did the crime, or possibly Parker, but definitely Ralph. Done and done. So Ben, you're the real ace detective here, and you've read some detective stories. Do you think that his stepson is the murderer?
Well, let's begin, as all good detectives do, by examining the facts of the case. As detectives, we primarily look for 3 key features of a crime: means, motive, opportunity. Motive: he suspected that his uncle was about to cut him off. Means: now, unfortunately, the murder weapon, the knife, seems to have been a weapon of opportunity that basically everyone in the story had access to at some point in time. But everyone does include Ralph, so we can't rule him out. And, of course, the opportunity. We need to establish an alibi for Mr. Patton, but things aren't looking good for him, and as we'll find out, nobody can account for his whereabouts, and he's skipped town, and it looks really bad, actually.
Yeah, and we should also point out, he was seen in the vicinity of the house on that evening, going up the side path that would have taken him by Roger's window.
Fortunately for Mr. Patton, Detective Ben, and to a lesser extent, Poirot, are on the case. And I know something that Inspector Reglin does not. I know that this is a detective novel, and I know that the most obvious person couldn't possibly have done it. So, I also know that this was entered into a writing contest to see who could guess it, and it's probably not Patton. So,
wouldn't that be a nice twist if it was the guy that was so obviously the guy?
At least one of those idiots in the club would have guessed that. I'll be honest, by the end, like up until the last chapter, like I won't. We'll go in order. We'll go in order. I won't spoil anything. So yeah, I'm pretty sure he didn't do it. I'm inclined to go with Miss Flora here, but I do wonder, as Flora, as I have previously stated, is currently sitting at about 20% suspicion, why is she trying to enlist the help of Dr. Shepard and this mysterious purveyor of vegetable marrows?
Yeah, that's actually why she's here. She wants Dr. Shepard's help to come talk to his neighbor, Parrot, who is in fact not Parrot, but edited what his actual name is later.
Hercule Poirot?
So Flora enlists Shepard's help, and Poirot is
Hercule Poirot?
Poirot. she gets them to investigate who really killed her uncle, because she doesn't think it's Ralph. So Belgian man decides that he will indeed investigate, and he goes to the scene of the crime with Dr. Shepard. So, couple things about this room now. The window was in fact unlocked, as I said before, and Poirot wants to figure out why. So he asked Parker if the fire had died down or not, with the idea of if there was a raging fire, maybe Roger just went and opened the window himself because it was too hot in the room. But it had died down, so that couldn't have been the case. Second, there was a chair in the corner that had been pulled out and then subsequently returned to its original position. Third, they find footprints outside with rubber studs, and as you said, those rubber studs are worn by Ralph Patton. And we don't... This is going to come up because I know you and talked about it when we were talking about this book. We have no earthly idea if this is a common thing or not in 1930s British society, if rubber studs are so weird that...
I'm guessing rubber was maybe hard to come by. Like, all my shoes have what I would describe to be rubber studs. I don't know what that even means.
Like cleats or something?
Yeah, is he wearing like soccer cleats? Because that would be weird. Sorry, football. Whatever.
Could be.
But
that would be strange. And then we would have reason to suspect him. 4, let's keep moving on. The call that was placed to Dr. Shepard was traced back to King's Abbot Station. And when asked about any suspicious people or strangers that had been hanging around, they mentioned a young man who was selling a dictaphone like a couple weeks ago, but Ackroyd decided, or he didn't buy one yet. I guess he hadn't decided if he wanted one at all. But no mention of weird people who hide their faces and throw their voices off. So here is a layout of who was in the house at the time. Major Blunt and Raymond, they were in the billiard room pretty much all night. Mrs. Ackroyd was also there until about 9:45, after which she was seen going upstairs to go to bed by Raymond and Major Blunt. Miss Ackroyd was seen by Parker and the housemaid as going from her uncle's room straight to bed. Now, Miss Russell doesn't have a solid alibi on where she was, but she says she was in her room. I don't think anyone can actually corroborate that.
I'm going to stop you there, because the only people who can corroborate anything are also suspects. And even if they were telling the truth, which I am damn sure they are not, they had all been drinking. Parker was bringing the dude scotch and soda on the minute before he was dead. I don't believe any of these people. And Flora was the last person to see him alive. 30%. She's 30% now.
So, Detective Ben, do you think that perhaps Roger Ackroyd could have gotten really drunk and then stabbed himself from behind and at a weird angle?
You know what? You know what, Nate? You're at 10%.
Oh, shit.
Yeah. Better watch yourself. I'm writing that down.
So, like I said, Ralph was spotted in the vicinity, so he's on the list, and he could have easily gotten into his uncle's study from where he was spotted.
And we know from the window, I hadn't actually thought of this until we were going over it again, which I know is kind of cheating on the format we had discussed. But the unlocked windows mean he must have let the person in.
Yes, that was one of the things that Poirot
Hercule Poirot?
that was one of the things that he suspected as well. The fingerprints on the blade don't match anyone's prints here, but that's fine because Inspector Raglan is certain that those prints will match Ralph whenever they end up finding him. So his theory is that Ralph came in through the window, they had a fight about money or something, and then he stabbed Roger at a weird angle and from behind. And after that, he left the way he came, and then he phoned up Dr. Shepard for some reason. Like maybe he's feeling guilty or something. I don't know. And neither does he. So again, Detective Ben, did Ralph do it?
So there's still like 200 pages left in this book, and unless it becomes like a madcap chase to catch Ralph Patton across the country, I don't think he did. No.
So Poirot notes that the fingerprints are arranged in a really weird pattern, so no one actually holding the knife to stab someone would have them in that pattern. So he's pretty sure that those are just going to be Roger Ackroyd's prints. He thinks that the killer grabbed his hand and just kind of put it on the knife.
So I'm somewhat skeptical of the science of fingerprinting in the best of circumstances, and I'm especially skeptical of it in the 1930s, and I'm especially skeptical of how he was able to lift such clear prints and how he didn't dust anything else in the room for prints.
It's a small town, Ben. They don't have enough money for more print dust.
There was like a chair that
They
Poirot
don't have enough money. They already used it all on getting the prints from the knife. They didn't have any more.
Okay, look, I may have a discreet white powder that I have some extra of that you could maybe use for fingerprints.
Well, it's too late for that. Besides, the killer probably wore gloves.
Well, then whose fingerprints are they?
Well, he thinks they're Roger Ackroyd's.
I swear to almighty Christ, if you suggest he stabbed himself, you're going right up to 20%.
So Poirot also points out that there are several other shoe prints in the same general area outside of the house, and that those are the prints of women's shoes, because there's a lot of servants here, and most of them are women. And Detective Raglan has an ironclad counter-argument to this. Shut up, and case solved.
So yeah, we talked about the studs in the shoes, but I also want to talk about, are they wearing like heels?
I have no idea.
How do you know it's women's shoes?
Maybe they're smaller and they just assume.
Oh, you're telling me not one of these guys? You're telling me Secretary Boy doesn't have small feet? Come on.
Yes, he's actually a size 16. He's got gigantic feet.
No, he don't. No, he don't. But yeah, I guess, I mean, I'll take the forensic evidence. I didn't pay much attention to it. And again, this is metagaming. That I know it's an Agatha Christie novel. I know she focuses on the human element to the crimes. She's not going to write like a deep forensic examination of the scene of the crime.
Well, plus they didn't have good technology for that anyway.
Yeah, like we're not doing CSI Fernley here. So I'm figuring this one is not going to be solved by the forensic evidence. So I'm just kind of like, okay, these are interesting pieces of information. You tell me there's lady shoe prints. Okay, then one of the women of the house was obviously out and about around that window. But yeah, I'm not too concerned with that.
So Poirot goes to investigate, and he finds that there is a small summer house on the side of the much larger main house that would be on the same pathway that would take you by Roger's study. So he goes inside to investigate without really asking or telling anyone, just walks right in. And inside he finds a feather quill and a white cambric cloth. So Dr. Shepard and Poirot make their way back towards the house when they stumble upon Miss Flora and Major Blunt sitting at a goldfish pond.
I think they mean koi pond.
So they observe the two in secret, and the two are getting really close, and Flora's like, "Oh, Major Blunt, please don't go back to Africa on safari." And he's like, I won't if you tell me that you don't want me to." And then Poirot, he reveals himself, and of importance, everyone noticed a glimmering object in the pond. Poirot reaches in, he comes up empty-handed, but then when everyone except Dr. Shepard moves on, he shows a ring that was in the pond inscribed "From R, March 13th," which was about 6 months prior to the story.
So we've got some interesting things here. So just to remind the listeners that Flora, the girl we were just talking about, and Ralph, the lead suspect, were in some kind of Pornhub step arrangement. And now we're finding out that not only did he have a side piece, but she's got a side piece. So there's some shenanigans going on here. I think both of them
what
are maybe
are you talking about? She has a side piece. Are you trying to suggest
Captain Colonialism there is clearly the one she's after. And he's like 20 years older than her, so that's a whole different section of Pornhub. But you know, to each his own. They're over 18, I assume. God, I didn't even think about that.
Yes,
but
I'm pretty sure.
I don't know, man. This place is so weird.
So next they go visit the lawyer who goes over the will on who's getting what after Roger passes. And once there, Mrs. Ackroyd throws shade on Miss Russell, saying that she was trying to marry Mr. Ackroyd until she stepped in and put a stop to it. Good for her.
Yeah,
I
good
guess.
for you bitch.
Yeah.
Like,
What an asshole.
Yeah.
God.
Like, yeah. This Mrs. Ackroyd, she is all about like servants these days. Like she's some kind of nobility. Like, lady, you're a mooch. Don't question a good thing. Okay?
Excuse me, Ben. She is nobility, okay? She is the widow of a rich guy and then had the good fortune of living with his rich brother.
If she's the widow of a rich guy, why ain't she rich?
Oh, yeah, that's right. I guess his brother is poor as fuck. She had the good fortune of living with a rich guy after his brother died on her, okay?
Yeah, and if that rich guy got married, maybe he decides he needs like one less. Wasn't it implied that she was trying to marry Roger Ackroyd?
Yes, it was strongly implied that after her husband, who is Roger's brother, died, she tried to marry Roger.
So she tried to marry her brother-in-law. Her brother-in-law is trying to marry his niece to his adopted son. My God.
We're going towards the family circle here.
Yeah, look, I'd never sanction murder. But this solved a lot of problems. And the fact that it was like kind of against Flora's will is like so gross. Like, oh Lord.
Yeah, Flora. I think both Flora and Ralph really did not want this marriage.
No, the uncle, they did agree to it. He can't force them to get married against their will, but they're both financially dependent on this dude who's like, I would really appreciate it. Like,
So the will stipulates that 20,000 pounds would be left to Flora. And Mrs. Ackroyd's pretty upset because that should have been left to her instead, because she totally would have used it properly and with the best intent for her daughter in mind. What were you saying?
Now, should have been broke within a year. But
Yeah,
the thing I was going to say is we both figured out later when we talk about another sum of money. That's a fuck ton of money.
That's a ton of money with inflation and getting into real money, American dollars.
Converting it out of that monopoly money the British use in a cold hard American cash. That's a lot.
Yeah.
Like she's set for life.
Well,
she could be.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. She would be set for life if she were
middle class.
Yeah.
She won't be able to have as many full-time servants, but oh Lord.
Mrs. Ackroyd. Yeah. Very, very upset that all this money is going to her daughter because she could have used it so much better and she totally wouldn't have blown it on shit and ruined both their lives. Now is a good time to say, I hate all these people. Like, they're all a bunch of money-grubbing assholes who don't work for a living and complain about how Roger didn't give them more money. And they talk about Roger like he's some kind of asshole, but most of the reasoning behind that is because he's not giving them as much money as they want.
So, a couple of things here. One, I'm going to say is you absolutely have to see Knives Out. Like, Knives Out borrowed so heavily from this book, and probably half a dozen books. But like, I want to highlight her character writing here again, because normally when we say I hate all of these people, we're saying it because like they're just bad people, but the author doesn't know they're bad people. Agatha Christie knows these are bad people. She's making a very clear comment on a very real phenomenon in society of when the patriarch of a wealthy family collapses and all of his descendants who thrive on nepotism are left to fend for themselves. It's like a feeding frenzy of sharks over his corpse. And that's exactly what's going on here. When the will is announced, everybody thinks they should get more. The servants get a nice cut. Flora gets a cut because she's his niece by blood and really his only blood relative left. So she gets a lot, and he leaves his estate, his whole estate, by the way, to Ralph. So Flora got 20,000 pounds. Ralph gets everything else, basically. And the servants get a small amount of cash, like what amounts to like a year's salary for each of them. Some of the longer serving ones get more, but I can totally, like, the way she depicts these people, the way they all try to save face, and the way they all know it's improper to behave the way they're behaving, but they still can't help but say it, and the weird excuses they find for their behavior. It's really funny, and she's obviously picking on something she's seen happen in real life, and I've seen it happen in real life.
Yeah, it's very well written, unlike some of the other books that we've talked about on this podcast.
I know we've sworn never to speak of it again, but I'm going to give it one more mention. Yeah, we've talked about how we work in the past. We're working on multiple episodes in varying stages at the same time. And you and I were kind of both editing the Fold episodes while we were working on the reading and the script for this episode. It is not in any way fair to compare Peter Clines to Agatha Christie. But I'm gonna. And not just Peter Clines, but in a way, a lot of the authors we've read. This book is only 300 pages, and I feel like I know each of these characters so well, and they feel like real, sometimes a little cartoony, but it's played up for comedic effect.
Yeah. I mean, we don't see a lot of Raymond, for example, throughout a good chunk of the book, but you know him. Like, I guess if someone went in and blocked out all the names in the book, you'd be able to figure out who was who just by how they're written.
Yeah, everybody has such a clear personality, and it's so like masterfully interwoven. The dialogue is just so good. So I loved this whole reading of the will scene. I love the reading of the will scene in every detective story, because every detective story seems to have one. And this is what I like to plug Knives Out yet again. That's what I loved in that movie. It was oh my God, the characters were so good. It was the same thing. It was a 2-hour movie with a huge cast, and you felt like you knew everybody.
I might watch that tomorrow.
I highly recommend it to everybody. It was my favorite movie of 2019.
Okay. Let's continue with the will reading scene. So while Dr. Shepard is talking with Mrs. Ackroyd, he's like, do you have enough money? Like, we can make sure you get enough money. I guess that's the lawyer. And, she's well off. And Raymond mentions then that Roger actually cut a check recently for £100 and put it in the safe. And the police or the lawyer or whomever, they ask him to go get it. And they bring the money. I guess it's the lawyer. And it's now only £60. There's £40 missing. I thought it was just like pocket money. Like, okay, whatever. That's not too much. But looking at inflation and converting that to US dollars, that amount of money is like $3,300 almost.
Yeah, I was like, Jesus Christ, that took this misdemeanor up to a felony. Like,
I thought that was like spending money, but no, that's a lot of money.
Yeah, no, she took over $1,000 for sure.
She?
Oh shit.
There's an odd conversation that was highlighted as well. Mr. Ackroyd was super pissed off at his parlor maid, whose name is Ursula Bourne. According to her, she messed up some papers on his desk, and he chewed her out for like half an hour and then fired her. So, like, she really must have fucked up those papers.
I don't know what a parlor maid is. I don't know how it's different from all the other maids that he has. What is a parlor? I know what a parlor game is. It's a game you play in your parlor, which is a room people used to have. I live in a 2-bedroom apartment. I cannot relate to any of this.
Merriam-Webster says, a maid in a private home whose chief duties are to attend to the parlor, the table, and the door. What that doesn't help at all.
But, like, that's 3 rooms. How messy does it get?
Very messy. He has more servants than he has people in his family, as you said.
Anywho.
So Poirot is like,
Hercule Poirot?
That story with messing up the papers, like that's like the worst lie I've ever heard in my life.
I think this is probably a good point to talk about Poirot's character a little bit, because we've gotten so, like, Poirot is I don't even know how many novels she wrote about him.
I said it at the beginning of this podcast, Ben. He's been in 33 novels and 54 short stories. Ben?
I'm sorry, I don't listen to you. But yeah, so Poirot is like one of the legendary detectives up there with like Sherlock Holmes and Dupin. And he's got quirks like they do. You mentioned he's a nicer Sherlock Holmes, but one of his quirks is that he's very self-confident. He does not pretend to be one whit less competent than he is. He knows exactly what he could do. Like, he tells her, if you hire me, I'm going to find out the truth. Are you sure you want that? Because he's like, when I get involved in this, I don't stop till it's done. And I'm going to learn everything there is to know. And they all think they want that, but they don't. And that's what Poirot is saying here. Poirot he gets each of these people around the table, all the suspects. And he tells them, every single person in this room is lying to me. And also he speaks in the third person sometimes, and I love it. And when he's talking to Flora, he calls himself Papa Poirot. And that is such a power move. He's like, don't worry, dear. Papa Poirot will find out. I was just like, God damn, take me, Papa. So,
his mustache is another Pornhub video.
But the other thing about Poirot is he's also very like fastidious and kind of OCD. He notices every little detail, and he's constantly like in the background of every scene, like straightening pictures and arranging things appropriately on tables. And so that's another just like little thing that Agatha Christie does that's just totally wonderful. So when he tells these people, you've seen enough of Poirot's character at this point in the book that when he says, "You're all lying to me. I'm giving you one chance right now to tell me what you're holding back. You can be silent if you want. I'll find out. I always do. But if anybody would like to come forward, now's the time." And even Dr. Shepard's like, "Oh, even I'm lying about something?" And he just turns and looks at him. He's like, "Yeah, all of you." And you know, as the reader, you know he's going to find out.
Shit just got real.
And you also know at this point, all of them are fucking lying because you're trying to solve this mystery too. And every single one of them is lying about something, and it pisses me off because I don't know which crime to suspect them of. They're all going to jail. Don't worry. Detective Ben finds the charge. But yeah, so I'm going to take a minute to run down the suspects just to remind the listener where we are.
Wonderful.
I've told Nate at this point as we were texting back and forth because Nate wanted me to keep meticulous notes about where I was in solving this case. I did suspect a woman of committing the crime for a couple reasons. I thought Roger Ackroyd may be more likely to let his guard down around a woman, let a woman in. I thought a lot of the women here seem to have financial problems, so they would have reasons to make demands on his purse, as he was overheard saying. And of course, Flora was the last one to see him alive. But there was enough going for each of those people that I couldn't definitively say. So first, I want to talk about the male suspects. We have Ralph Patton, who we know couldn't possibly have done it because all the evidence says he did it. We have Parker, who, while a weaselly bastard, doesn't seem to be a killer. Definitely an attempted, possibly successful blackmailer, but not a killer. Captain Colonialism, honestly, I think that dude's just trying to get with the niece, and the rest of the time he's kind of like borderline falling asleep.
He does seem very slow.
And then we got the secretary. He's still kind of up there on my list of all the guys. He's the most suspicious. His whole manner is way too casual about this murder. Like, he's way too chipper for somebody whose boss, who I guess he's a live-in secretary for. So this is not only his livelihood, but also his house he just lost. He doesn't seem to give a shit, but also he didn't inherit a ton of money. So yeah, I don't really know where I stand on him. He's probably the highest of my suspects for the men. And then the women, we've got Flora, who wants her freedom and now conveniently has her freedom. She certainly seems capable of deception and has a desperation and was the last person to see him alive. Flora right now is my primary suspect. Then we have Mrs. Ackroyd, who is incredibly desperate. Unlike Flora, has no blood tie to Roger Ackroyd and didn't get anything in the will. And the only question I have is, is she really as dumb as she seems to be? And spoilers, yes, she is.
She's horrendously
yeah, she's
stupid.
Dumb as
yes.
a goddamn rock. So, wasn't her. And there's Ursula. She had a fight with Ackroyd, and she's clearly lying about the subject of that argument. And also, Ursula is the name of a cartoon mermaid witch. And as this podcast goes on, I'm having a hard time remembering exactly what's real. So, can't rule her out.
No, you did rule out Miss Russell, the housekeeper.
Too boring. She's a square, man. She just seems too like straight-laced. I could see her. She definitely knows something about someone that she's not telling, but if anything, I just suspect that maybe somebody she's trying to protect somebody. I can't see her actually having committed a crime. And I think this is where we are going to end part 1, guys. Unfortunately, Detective Ben was not able to wrap up the mystery of Roger Ackroyd's death in one episode. To be fair, I don't think Mr. Poirot himself could have done any better. I will return next week, and we will solve this case. After that, we are going to be reading Sorcery by Terry Pratchett. You can look for that episode on September 6th. As always, you can follow us on Twitter at WABpod. We do have a Goodreads group. That is Words About Books Podcast. You can find that by going to the group section and searching for that title, Words About Books Podcast. That is probably the best place to go if you're looking to keep up with the reading. We try to post everything we know we're going to be reading. I think right now we're probably caught up out to November. And of course, you can check out our blog for additional show notes and commentary. That is at blog.wordsaboutbooks.ninja. If you're interested in reading any of our fiction, you can check that out at poorlywritten.ninja. And as always, thank you so much for listening, and we will see you next time. When Bye, people
guys.
come over, I don't want them to be like, I'm going to Ben's. Where does Ben live? I want them to be like, where's Benley Park?
Henley Park. Original.
Hercule Poirot.
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 Poirot. Row.
Poirot. Like poisson.
Sure.